There are no heroes here. For the past year or so, I've been a part of a group that I found here on Reddit. Things were pretty cool at first. The DM let me play a homebrew I've been looking at for a while. The other players were cool and friendly. They will be referred to as such. Cat, our tiefling warlock. Grizzly, air genesee fighter/rogue. Mug, kobold rogue/ranger. Mountain Man, played several characters across my time in this group, but was most recently a goblin soul knife. Dog, a friend of mine who plays in my own group and replaces Grizzly later. Bird, the DM, me, possibly the worst thing to happen to this group. The first several months went fine. One of my first experiences with a long-term DM campaign, and I liked the camaraderie that was forming between all of us. Mountain Man was loud and boisterous. Mug was quiet and wise in the way that beings with a century of experience tend to be. Grizzly was really cool as a person, but ultimately had to be forced into roleplay due to his chronic quietness. Cat was probably the nicest one there, in real life and in character, despite her life circumstances, which I will not divulge, but she's in pain at basically all hours of the day. My character, as well as Mountain Man's newest character, joined the group because we all took a contract to hunt down a monster that was stealing the faces of the local children, which takes us about a month in real life to accomplish. As our adventure progressed, we found ourselves heading north towards the world's Arctic North. We stopped in some towns, we do some side quests. The paladin heals a village elder of her blindness. Everything is going well. I honestly thought this would be a group that I could actually finish a campaign with. But then came the Yondigo. Don't know if I said that right. We'd been getting inklings that something was seriously wrong with this area for some time, since we pulled into the most recent town. The locals informed us that hunting was becoming harder and harder, and that hunters had to travel further and further from town to bring any food. Additionally, the hunters have been finding savagely mutilated corpses and the remains of unnatural creatures, such as deer that had grown fangs and was slowing off fur in place of poorly formed scales, and that those monsters were completely inedible and poisonous. This place was basically the equivalent of Alaska or Siberia, so crops could only be grown with the assistance of druids, and hunting was a significant source of food for the village. We decided to stay the night, but are only at the inn for a few hours when a pair of the hunters returned to town, empty-handed and looking confused that one of their fellow hunters wasn't there already, as he left for town before them. This quickly escalates into the party and the hunters rushing back out into the wilderness to retrace the hunters' steps and look for their lost partner. 3 hours later, and the hunters stop us, noticing human footprints leading off the path into the woods. We cautiously begin following them, before being ambushed by the aforementioned corrupted wildlife, which goes down with few problems. The party spends some time investigating the bodies before moving on, and on to the map that is still burned into my memory. We travel further into the woods and eventually tell the hunters to turn back as things have become too dangerous for them. This area was densely forested and it was pitch black outside. As we approach, we notice a cave through some trees, but before we're given a chance to investigate, we're made aware that we are not alone and that something was stalking us. The exact reason he did this escapes me, but for some reason, Mountain Man pulls out the Wand of Wonder that we'd gotten a while back and attempts to roll a specific spell with it. Instead, he casts Lightning Bolt on a nearby tree, which catches on fire. He uses the wand again, attempting to get a spell that could put out the tree, but instead casts darkness on the tree and its surroundings. This is where mistakes began to be made. Cat, Mountain Man, and Grizzly run off into the darkness to keep a wildfire from starting, while Mug and I both come up with the idea of stealthing into a tree and waiting for the beastie to follow them into the darkness where it would have an advantage against them. We both roll stealth and I roll poorly. Turns out, this thing has an ambusher. which means I didn't even get to roll perception against it. Alright, fine. I rolled poorly, and I'm getting targeted. Makes sense. Bird asks me to roll a constitution save against something, which I do, and I fail. Also fine. RNG, sus, does not smile upon me this day. It's what happens next that catalyzes some of my later decisions. It turns out that this monster has an aura that will paralyze me for a minute if you fail a constitution save. It also turns out that the monster had triple attack. So the following happens. 1. I get ambushed with no warning thanks to the Yondigo's high stealth and ambusher. 2. I get within range of its aura and fails the constitution save, paralyzing me. 3. The Yondigo gets a surprise round on me. 4. I got critically hit 3 times in a row, taking me to negative HP instantly. 5. Initiative is rolled, and Mug gets 1 turn to attack it to try and pull it off of me. He fails to do so. 6. I get critically hit 3 more times, dealing so much damage to me that I am dead instantly. I was livid. I just got killed for no good reason. We were at level 9 at the time, and I still got told the equivalent of rocks fall, you're dead. Bird has options to avoid killing me, like dragging me off as a live food source, or going after the others so the Yondigo could gorge itself without interruption, but he did none of those things. Later on, Bird would tell us he ran this encounter 2 times with his friends, and that they had no problems with it. Which sounds fine on paper, until you learn that these friends are compulsive power gamers, run optimally at all times, don't act in character, and treat it like a war game. And most importantly, we're not given a wand of wonder. We were none of these things. He also revealed that his thing had Mask of the Wild, so it could stealth just about anywhere, and a stealth mod so high that even the most perceptive of us could only dream of seeing it if it rolled low, and we rolled near perfectly. Around this time, we could call Bird on the fact that this monster was wildly overpowered, and he refused to take responsibility for killing me, saying that that's just how the dice rolled. You made mistakes, and you were punished for them. Which, out of context, I would agree with, except he's the one that designed the monster, and that never stopped to think about how broken it is. He didn't even remember that it paralyzed you. He had deluded himself into thinking it was simply a stun. I was all but ejected from the voice channel in about 20 seconds, within the first 2 hours of the session. Months passed. I never forgot what happened to my character, and when it came to making my next one, Bird decided to arbitrarily lock down on the homebrew. It went from homebrew with my permission and revision to no homebrew at all, which was something else that had me well and truly pissed. He advertised allowance of homebrew was one of the reasons I joined, and now I don't even get that. He claimed it was for story reasons, but even when I offered him incredibly easy to write in brews, like a duelist fighter subclass, not even a full class, he shot me down and flatly told me to pick a vanilla class or leave his table. So I did, because at this point I developed a good friendship with Mug and Cat, and I didn't want to lose that over Bird's nonsense. I made a tiefling blood hunter, who recently got cursed with lycanthropy. I never did get to reveal that to the party, for reasons that will become clear. As time passes, I come to learn that Bird is about as raw as you can get, and has an intense disdain for any character options that aren't written in the books. He's the kind of person that, when presented with an interesting character concept, will, instead of finding a brew that matches it perfectly and working on it with his DM, will shoehorn the vanilla material into something that only vaguely resembles the original concept. Only, he was allowed to use homebrewed materials, whether it be monsters, spells, or items. Hell, he was the only one that was even allowed to run the material's RAI. Life as a player on this table was incredibly limiting, and you only got to think outside the box when he allowed it. But I stuck with it, because Mug and Cat were good friends. Some more time passes, and Grizzly has vanished off the face of the planet. He has left the server without a word to any of us, and has blocked all of us. This takes us all by surprise, even Bird. Though I have no proof, I suspect Bird said something to Grizzly that made him decide to wash his hands of us. Because of this, Bird decides to take a break from his campaign and let someone else have a turn in the chair. I would have taken it, but I was already DMing my own long-term campaign, and I didn't want to run another one, even if it was pre-written for me. So Mug decides to try his hand at running Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is where Dog comes in as Grizzly's replacement. Dog is a player in my weekly game, and he was invited to this one to fill the seat. This mostly goes over without a hitch, but I can't help but notice that Bird has tagged all of the original players with the original role in his server and not Dog. Furthermore, Dog has been gated out of every channel that doesn't have to do with Mug's Frost Maiden game, making it clear he didn't and never considered Dog to be one of us. He actually pushed back on letting him in, but only went through it because Mug, Cat, and I all vouched for him. Initially, Bird plays a Triton Ranger, who played the role of the straight man in our group. There's not much to say about this portion of the story. Credit where it's due though, Bird played the straight man especially well, and I actually really liked the dynamic he had with the party. After a while though, he switched his character for another, because the rest of the party is too goofy. This caught me by surprise, because as I just mentioned, I really enjoyed the funny man, straight man dynamic he had going with the rest of the party. In hindsight, I enjoyed Bird's time as this character a lot more than I thought it would. Most of our sessions during this time begin in one of 10 towns' inns, and the party typically had some great roleplay sessions in these inns. Telling the other party members about ourselves, getting up to some hijinks that I really enjoyed, right up until Bird opened his mouth. Anytime Bird feels we've been roleplaying too long, he would cut us off whether he felt like it, even mid-sentence, to ask us if we could hurry up. If we went on for much longer than that, he would cut us off again, at mid-sentence or otherwise, to tell us that his character is packing his things and leaving in an attempt to make us stop and follow him. Eventually, though, this Triton Ranger slips back beneath the waves because you all act like dolphins. And his next character is introduced by literally falling out of the sky. I'm in the dark for about 5 minutes before I realize what he's done. He's managed to talk Mug into letting him play Scout from TF2. Not even a character that just sounds or acts like him. No, he is that Scout. Established backstory and everything. He references the Medic, Australium, Saxton Hale several times in character, and it's just the most immersion-breaking thing ever. During his time as a Scout, Bird murders an NPC that was relevant to my story, and that I specifically wanted alive. He then set the inn on fire to cover up the crime, and then pretended to have done nothing wrong. Obviously, I know what's happened out of character, but no matter how much evidence I point out to Scout, he refuses to admit what he's done. Eventually, the guards start closing in, and I'm forced to break character to defend the Scout. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. Which was something my character never would have done, but to keep the party dynamic intact, I did so. This portion only lasts a bit longer, but in between this point and Mug vacating the DM's chair, Bird starts boundary pushing to see just how far he can get Mug to let him go. He gradually ramps up the LOL, so random actions, until realistically the party would have killed him or abandoned him, but didn't because we needed the party dynamic to stay intact. Bird starts directly challenging Mug as the DM, arguing about his rulings, and even borderline gaslighting him by constantly interjecting with if I was the DM, I would've, in an attempt to get his way. This goes on until Mug steps down as DM. Eventually, Mug vacates the DM's chair, because he wasn't confident in his ability to run the module, on top of how poorly written and formatted most of WOTC's materials are. In his place, Cat takes the chair, and she decides to run Wild Beyond the Witchlight. In this game, Bird makes a shared backstory with Mug, in which Bird plays a pacifist, Dragonborn monk, and Mug plays a similarly pacifistic Minotaur druid. Frequenters to the sub probably know why pacifism is one of the marks of the beast when it comes to TTRPGs. This time is no different. It's worth noting that this is more or less Kat's first time DMing. She makes a number of rookie mistakes that come up later. During this time, Bird continues to irk and myth the party through various methods and actions, that were meddlesome, but not really worth noting if it weren't for the fact he was doing it so constantly. He's even learned a new trick, talking over the DM. It's one thing if Cat starts talking in the middle of Bird talking. It's another thing entirely for Cat to be mid-exposition and the Bird starts commenting on things in character or cutting Cat off to tell her what he's doing. This is also constant. He did this so frequently that his voice effectively became prioritized over Cat's. In one instance, he talked over Cat for nearly a minute despite her constantly saying his name to get him to stop. Eventually, Cat, who is typically very mild-mannered, unless her character dictates otherwise, nearly blows out my ears by screaming into the microphone, "Bird, shut the fuck up." That's what it took him to finally stop. He was better after this, but not by much. The carnival is meant as a social interaction zone, with a lot of NPCs and chances to pick up magic items, such as wand of prestidigitation or other low-tier magic items. This does not please Bird, who is rushing us through the carnival as fast as he can to get away with, because he doesn't think this is fun. Event after event, Bird is pressuring us to move on, and at the end of the session, he says, "This is kind of boring, can we go faster next time?" If the carnival is meant to encompass the exploration and socializing aspects of D&D, and Bird finds both of these boring, then what left is there for him to enjoy? Sir, you are a pacifist. You should be avoiding combat wherever possible. Yet here you are, pressuring the DM and the party to give it to you as fast as humanly possible. You're trying to speed run D&D. So, not only is Bird trying to break the sound barrier with an incessant "let's move ons," he's also generally acting like a holier-than-thou tool to the NPCs, and more than once, one of the other party members has to drag him away, while someone else apologizes to the NPC in question. Once, during an after-session hangout, Cat asks for any critiques, and Bird says, "Feels like you're trying to rush us through this. I was having fun role-playing, but you kept cutting us off." Eventually, we progressed through enough of the carnival's events that we ran out of time in character, and we proceeded to the next location in the adventure, the Feywild. One of the first encounters we run into here is an encounter with some Robin Hood-style rabbit folk thieves, who threatens to rob us. They are promptly told to go screw themselves, and it looks like a fight is about to break out when the rabbits hear a ticking sound from the water and promptly turn tail and flee as fast as their boots can take them. Boats. Out of the water comes Denial, a giant alligator, basically the one from Peter Pan. Bird, showing yet again that he does not understand the definition of the word pacifism, makes no attempt to talk his way out of this or refrain from combat. The second it is his turn, he runs up on Denial and uses his breath attack on it. Something that hurts us a few minutes later when it's revealed Denial is sentient, and that we absolutely could talk our way out of this. But the second Bird hears roll initiative, it's all violence all the time. The session ends there, and Cat pulls the curtain aside a bit and admits that there is no way to kill the rabbits in this encounter. They're plot-relevant NPCs, and they need to show up later for the story to make any sense, and as such, the DM is ordered to do everything in their power to keep them alive. As I understand it, the way the book is written, the party either escapes the rabbits, or loses, and are stripped down to their underwear in the middle of the Feywild with little to no middle ground. Cat has modified this encounter so that this doesn't happen. Rather than pitting us against the rabbits, she has created Denial as a possible combat encounter here. The session ends at 9:30ish, or 9ish. I hang around until nearly 11. Nearly 2 hours of listening to Bird insist again and again that Cat is wrong, and that there has to be some way to beat the rabbits in this encounter, while showing no faith in her ability to know what she's talking about. Cat, increasingly agitated, reads verbatim from the book while the players aren't allowed to kill the rabbits in the encounter. Nearly an hour of this back and forth. It was excruciating. I'm hanging around because at this point, Bird's behavior has devolved to the point where I feel that Cat needs protection from him. We aren't in the same room, and he's never shown evidence of being a creep, but we are afraid he'll say something that can completely shatter her confidence and or their relationship. Mug is with me in the voice chat during this with similar feelings. We're both chiming in when asked for our opinions, but the process is still agonizing. Cat is getting more and more frustrated with Bird, and then it happens. Bird, screw it, I'm looking up the guide and figure this out for myself. We're all stunned into silence for a moment. The audacity of this man. We all simultaneously tell him, no, he absolutely cannot do that. And he keeps insisting. He's gotten it into his head that Cat has to be wrong, that she's misunderstood something, or that she's too inexperienced to grasp the nuance of one of the worst campaign guides I've ever seen. Kat's been reading through this thing for over a week, trying to make it make sense, and this is the best solution she has for it. He keeps saying, I'm gonna look up the guide, for nearly 30 minutes of us shouting him down, and he eventually gives it up, but I'm not convinced he didn't just do it anyway when we weren't looking. The party was given access to a magic weapon that was bigger on the inside and was enchanted with powerful magic. I was one of the co-owners alongside Kat's DMPC, which, despite their reputation, I have no complaints about. Now, Kat's character had her room hidden behind a secret door hidden behind a bookshelf. In order to open the door, you had to find a particular title on one of the books and pull it, which would open the door, at which point the title would move into a different book. Thing is, though, you could not remove the books without permission from myself or Kat, and Bird did not have it. So when Bird tried to bring Kat some stew he'd made, he found himself stymied by the secret door, unable to find the correct book or remove it to activate the door. I opened the door and took the stew from him to give to Kat, and warned him not to enter her room without permission before closing the door behind me. He immediately starts trying to open the door behind me by pulling on the book I'd pulled, finding that nothing happened, which then devolves into a 15-minute argument about why he can't just follow behind me. Arguing with the DM mid-session and making it infinitely more complicated than it needed to be, simply because he couldn't stand being wrong, the answer was literally 4 words long. You don't have permission. The next event of note is shortly after we part ways with Denial. We begin heading north, looking for the nearest settlement, when we hear an ethereal voice echoing across the entire landscape. As part of my backstory, I'm aware of what this means, and I order the party to go to higher ground as the water level in the surrounding areas begins to rise rapidly in a biblical level flood. We climb the nearest hill so we can access, and even then, the water is still lapping at our toes. The water stays like this for several minutes before receding and leaving a morass of quicksand and mud in its wake. Unfortunately, we're on a time limit, and we're forced to trudge through it. Kat had us roll survival checks to find solidish ground, and to avoid the really deep or lethal stuff. Inevitably, though, we fail, and myself, Mug, and Mountain Man fall into the mud. Kat's inexperience really shows during this event, as several bad decisions were made. We fall into the mud, and we all begin descending into it at a rapid rate. Mug and Mountain Man, who is sitting on Mug's shoulder, get out thanks to Bird assisting Mug and Mug using a thorn whip to help pull himself out. Meanwhile, I'm left to sink beneath the surface of the mud. Kat had me roll a d4 plus 1 every turn to determine how many feet I sink per turn. As soon as my face goes beneath the mud, I'm instantly rolling drowning checks, in spite of the fact that players in this game can hold their breath for several minutes at a time. I'm nearly 10 feet deep in the mud by the time I remember I have Shape Earth and could probably use it to free myself, as it only has semantic components. Unfortunately, the mud is too thick for you to move your hands, according to Bird and Cat. Well then, how is the mud thin enough for me to sink a foot a second, but too thick for me to even twitch my fingers? It takes Mountain Man diving back into the mud with a chain in his hand to finally get me out of the mess, as Mug, Bird, and Dog pull us out of the mud. All good, right? Nope. I'm still rolling drowning checks because my lungs are full of mud. But I'm free of the mud. I can use Shape Earth on myself to get the mud out, right? Nope. Cat says I can't concentrate on the spell. No check or anything. Bird agrees with this for some reason. Eventually, Mug starts beating me into the ground by slapping my back and force-feeding me water and eventually vomit out the dirt, wishing I was dead. This whole event was largely caused by Kat's inexperience as a DM, but Bird simply played along, letting her continue with her misunderstanding of the rules because he thought it was funny. He said as much too after the session. After the session, I told Kat why you shouldn't reduce players to set pieces, and she apologized, which I forgave her for, as she had no hesitation doing so, and she understood she'd done something wrong. The final event takes place during the session after the mud incident. We find a magical moving inn. We hang out for a bit, we get the next plot hook, and the inn takes us to the next location, a moving mountain that is covered in awakened trees. We take 3 steps out of the inn, and we've got a half dozen trees waving at us and greeting. Previously, I'd warned Bird's character, that there were things possible here that would boggle his mind. He completely ignored this advice. While the rest of the party were role-playing a bit with the trees, being polite, paying the proper respects, and asking where the person we were looking for could be found, Bird decides this has gone on long enough and interrupts me in the middle of the reveal that I grew up in the Feywild by saying, "I'm running up the mountain at full speed and I'm not stopping for anything." Mug and I watched him run off into the forest. At this point, Kat pulls Bird into a different voice channel. In character, Bird is only gone for a few seconds before we hear a wooden snapping sound, followed by a high-pitched shriek as the forest trembles around us. We run up the hill in the direction that Bird ran, and found him in extremely rough shape, grappled by one of the trees, with another nearby tree cries in the corner, one of its limbs broken off. Previously, I'd asked the forest to trip him as a joke, and so we could catch up, and this young tree obliged my request by attempting to trip him. Bird attacked the limb and snapped it, which caused the tree's big brother to attack him. The trees only have 1 attack, and it automatically grapples you if it crits. Well, the tree got a critical hit, and dealt enough damage to take Bird down to 2 HP. The big tree demands that Bird apologize to his little brother, which I instruct Mug to do everything he can to help the small tree, as it would make the big tree more receptive to requests if his brother was feeling better. At this point, Bird starts complaining, mid-sentence and mid-session yet again, that those trees came out of nowhere. Why am I grappled? I didn't even get to roll a check. And most importantly, I didn't do anything wrong. At which point, Kat explains exactly what he did wrong in character. And out of character says, "I asked you several times if you were sure, and you went through with it anyway." Bird: "Okay, I want to roll acrobatics to escape the grapple." Kat: "Okay, fine." They both roll, and Bird beats the tree. Or he would have if Kat hadn't inputted the roll command improperly. She rolls properly, and the tree soundly beats Bird, leaving him trapped in the grapple. Big tree: "I apologize to my little brother. I'm going to kill you for your trespass." 2 words. Bird could fix this whole situation with 2 words, and we could go on our way untroubled and unmolested on the tree's word. You know what Bird does instead? I use my breath attack on the small tree. All of us are stunned into silence again. Kat: "Are you sure? If you say yes, you're rolling a new character." Bird: "Kill me, I don't care." And so Kat does exactly as she promised, and Bird gets slammed again, putting him well below 0 HP. Mug starts rolling medicine on him to try and stabilize him, while Bird rolls death saves. Mug initially wants to use his final spell slot to cast Cure Wounds on Bird, but Kat says, "Don't waste your spell slots." Out of context, that sounds like she's saying, "Don't bother, I'm going to kill him anyway, and you're going to waste a spell slot." What she admitted later was that all that was left in the session was a social interaction with a friendly NPC who might have given us a quest and then given us what we came for. In the moment, however, Big Tree: "If he doesn't apologize when he wakes up, this whole forest shall be set against all of you." Me: "Wise spirit of the forest, might I perhaps suggest an alternative?" Go on. "If you grant this mortal fool his life and invoke the ancient laws of this land, this one will owe you his life, and you may ask of him anything you wish." "And how do I know he will pay that debt, when the lady of these lands is no longer present to enforce them?" "You are the spirit of the forest. This whole mountain and all its bounty is yours to command. Turn him green, make him require hours in the sun every day, turn his hand to wood. Surely you will have something that will work." Very well. What follows is a grand display of magic, as the tree invokes the magic of the forest to curse Bird with a permanent -1 to all D20 rolls until he apologizes. The trees tell us to get lost, and we drag Bird's unconscious body up the mountain towards our destination, where we find a modest home inhabited by a goblin garbed in clothes with a great many keys hanging off of it. Merry meet, fair travels! How can I jingle jangle help you find this I just totally messed that up. Let me try again. Merry meet, fair travelers, how can Jingle Jangle help you this fair morn? So glad you asked, Jingle. You say we're looking for a key that... Wait, am I not up yet? No, you're still unconscious for 4 hours. Why can't you guys just wait for me to wake up? So you want your party members to just sit on the edge of the clearing this guy's house is in for 4 hours just so you can come back with 1 HP. Yes. We're not going to wait that long for you to recover from a chain of events that was entirely your own fault. Right? I'm a just Discord disconnect sound. So first you say you don't mind if your idiocy kills you, and now you're mad enough to rage quit after we saved your life with the easiest curse release I've ever heard of. The session stopped right then and there. Nobody wanted to go on after what had just happened. It was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Right after this happened, I wrote up a message on Discord calling him out for all of his shit. Tonight had been building for months. I had been slighted, dismissed, treated unfairly, and had been forced to play at a table with someone who evidently thought he could push around an inexperienced DM around. But more importantly, someone who had no respect for the people who considered him a friend. I posted it on my own server first, where Cat, Mug, and Dog all read it and agreed with everything. But then, before I dropped it on Bird's head, it started a countdown to me getting banned. These were his final words before I got banned 6 minutes and 33 seconds later. Well, you were kind of a shit player too, OP. I regret not banning you sooner. So that should be it, right? We got rid of a bad player and DM who'd long overstayed his welcome, right? No. This entire series of events has left a rancid taste in my mouth. Relationships shouldn't end like this. Could I have handled my call out better? Yeah, probably. Could I have simply left the server without a word? Yes, I absolutely could have faded into the dark night without a fight, but I chose not to. In the aftermath of all of this, Mountain Man has cut contact with us as he simply does not want the drama or the reminders of what happened. I still talk to Cat, Mug, and Dog, and while Cat initially had plans to restart her game after what happened in her own server, she has since abandoned these plans, racked by guilt at what has happened and tormenting herself with questions of what she could have done differently. This whole series of events have stressed her out even more than she already is in her normal life. She doesn't know if she'll come back to the game after what happened. I hope and pray to whatever God is listening that she does, and she is a fantastic person in spite of her circumstances. I dread the moment she says she's not coming back, as she's one of the best players and friends I've ever had. As of now, she is refusing to talk to any of us. She set herself to do not disturb and will likely not surface for days at the very least. Cat, if you see this before talking to any of us, know that we love you like family, and our lives would be worse without you in them. Bird, if Reddit blocking works like I think it does, you likely won't see this post, if ever. I regret how I told you, but I don't regret what's said in the slightest. Your lack of self-awareness, your inability to admit you were wrong and apologize, and your lack of basic respect for us ruined your friendship with me, with Cat, with Mug, and whatever relationship you had with Dog. I could have simply faded without a word like Grizzly, but I chose to tell you how I really felt. And while I know that you're hurt and you feel betrayed, and that I infiltrated your group and stole all of your friends, I told you those things because if nobody tells you what you're doing wrong, you will never grow as a person. You probably won't forgive me for a very long time, if ever. But one day, I hope you grow from this and realize just how much you can make someone suffer in silence from your actions. The bitter sting of betrayal lasts a long time, but it does fade. For what it's worth, Bird, I'm sorry. There are no heroes in this story, Reddit. Not me, not Mug, not Cat or Dog, or even Mountain Man, but especially not me. Perhaps it needed to be done, or perhaps I simply pulled the trigger on something that would have gone off without me. Either way, it's my fault that a friend group is likely irreparable, shattered, and by my hand alone, that one of my friends is tormenting herself over the what could have been, possibly never to return. So yeah, that's my horror story, and I could be more disappointed that I'm posting it at all. There are no heroes here. This was definitely a very long horror story that, in the comments, Mountain Man had showed up. The story was not one with any right or wrong. There were issues that everyone had a part of, and that's likely why the OP named it No Heroes in the story. No one was perfect, and one thing that might have helped was more communication. However, doesn't really change the fact that it felt like Bird was very childish in many parts. It seemed it had to be his way or the highway. It must have sucked with the Wendigo. Being killed in one hit means that both the party and DM messed up in the encounter. The DM may have made it a bit too strong, or the party just didn't react correctly and work together like they should have. I do slightly understand his annoyance with homebrew. It was the biggest reason OP had joined. He was promised homebrew possibilities, and then it was practically taken away. Cat, even as a rookie DM, deserved the same respect as a regular one. It is so rude to talk over the DM. It happened so much in our game, and I know how much it bothers the DM. Don't play if you're going to act like that. The DM is important. They're the ones telling you everything. There are more things in this, but I'm going to stop there. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.